a fine selection from around, well, North America, Canada, um, somewhere further south from Germans, somewhere that it's on its own planet for Babassi. Uh, I'm not sure where. I'm not sure where the Evita is. Probably Switzerland at the moment still, and the planet of Wolverhampton for Keith, and there's keeps claiming it's England, but it's sort of the Welsh border end of life for our host tonight, and Paul up in uh, swimming from the lake, um, and there's an iPhone just come in. Anyway, Julian, wherever Julian is in this world,
Ship's still on Stour, just south of Stratford-on-Avon.
south, Bardland.
Right. Mm.
Yes. So, anyway, without further ado, and stop me rattling on for 3 hours, does that look like yes, iPhone with blue sky behind.
Oh, that's Baden.
Yeah, I know. It's just, but he's just baring his teeth, with his MAGA cap on. That's because he can't smack me from this distance.
I'm at a bus stop in Camden Town.
Okay.
Sunny Camden, on the beach in Camden. Right. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Mike Rust, the inimitable Mike Rust, who will be our host for tonight, and or today or this afternoon, as Julian said, wherever we are in this big wide world. So I'm going to love you and leave you. Omar's coming in. Omar is now back at the cafe, permanently. Well, it's for a while anyway.
Good.
So that's brought us up to date, and I'm just going to disappear. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, John, and make sure your family feed you, because I've got a feeling if it was down to my children to feed me, I'd be starving. So don't worry about things.
No, they're very good. They're very good.
Yes, okay. So go away and enjoy yourself and have a lovely family meal. Leave all the work done to us. Don't worry about it. Don't think
I think
that we're going to miss you.
Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
So I'm sat here back in Shropshire. I've had a couple of weeks off from storytelling and stuff, basically doing all the stuff that I have been doing. As some of you know, 2 weeks ago, exactly at this time, I was in the Glens of Antrim with Liz Weir, where her kit is to die for. I got back and I looked at her kit and I thought, the first thing I said to Lynn was, the kit I'm using at the moment is going to get a lot better very quickly after seeing. But Liz Weir, God bless her, and I've known her since the early 1990s. When the lockdowns came, she applied to a grant to the Irish government because of the Zoom meeting. She got thousands of pounds to put a big Zoom TV and kit and everything into her house. I'm so impressed. She's a wonderful storyteller, but she's so well organised. Right. So those of you, I think most of you have been here before. On my way back, Paul, I stopped in Kendal because we came back from Larne, came round to Carlisle. This makes sense to us in the UK for you fellas. And I stopped in Kendal. Funnily enough, I ended up in that pub down by the old bridge. It's the Three Bells, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I thought it was. Yes. I knew you'd know where it was.
And 'tis haunted.
It's got to be.
Yes.
Right. It was haunted by some very good beer, I must point out. Okay. So I'm going tonight. I don't normally do this, but tonight, because when I look around the patch at the moment, I think sometimes these are strange times that we live in, and times can be weird. So I went through my vast repertoire of stories, and I came up with this one. And it's one that goes way back. It's one that when I was told it, they told me it was told 1,500 years ago. And as you'll tell by the story, that it goes even further back than that. And it's funny sometimes, as we, the oral storytellers, say, how can there be an argument about when it was first written down? It is that old. For there was once a king, and he lived with Mrs. King. And he lived with Mrs. King very happily. And it was at the time in the Welsh Brythonic languages of the 5th and 6th centuries. They called him a king, but nowadays they call it the era of the princes, where there was a small kingdom. So his kingdom would have been about the size of Shropshire, even less than. And he had a son who was growing up to be, they could tell he was going to be good at this, and a daughter. And the daughter, she was the most beautiful, most wise, the best daughter of ever, and slightly spoilt, as you can tell by the description her father gave of her. And all things were good. The weather was good, people were coming together, and just quietly the seasons, as we know now, from the winter to the spring to the summer to the autumn, all were passing well. But one day when the king woke up, Mrs. King didn't wake up, for she hadn't woken up, and she wasn't going to wake up. And the grief hit him in his heart, and the grief hit him so hard that he went and sat on his throne, and he just sat there and didn't move and didn't speak. And the grief pervaded into his kingdom, and it pervaded into the very weather that that kingdom had. For this just happened after Christmas, in the depths of the winter. And as spring is unfolding, as it is now as I sit in Shropshire, it unfolded everywhere else, but not there. For not there, the grief and his power of just him just sitting there held the spring back. And people began to wonder. People looked round, and it just wasn't coming out. And in the end, they said, we've got to do something about this. And it was his daughter that sat down and said, tell me what we can do. Get all the wise books that you can think of. Get all the wise thinkers that you can get of. Get everything you can think of and put in front of me in all these wise books, in the Bible, in the Quran, and everywhere else that a code of living has been put. Tell me there must be something that would help. And they went through all the books, and they went through all the wisdoms that they could think of. They went to the great universities in Aberystwyth and places like that, and nobody could think of a solution. And in the end, it was the court jester. Now, the court jester has a role of being comedic and entertaining people, sometimes telling stories and singing, but sometimes he was there because he had a line to some of the older wisdoms. The older wisdoms that would come through the old wives. These old wives knew a lot. That's why they're called old wives' tales. And they looked at him and they said, can you help? And he said, no, but maybe I know someone who can. And they all looked at him and he said, on the very edge of the kingdom, as you go to the top of Plynlimmon and you look over to the west and you can see the sea and then you can see Ireland and whatever beyond, there's a storyteller. And he sits at the very end. He lives in a little house and he's got a decking, and in his decking in the evenings, he looks over those lands. Maybe he will know something in one of the stories that he knows. Why don't we go and ask him? So the princess, the daughter, she went and she found the storyteller, and he was sat there just as it'd been described. A little fire on a decking overlooking the sea and the mountains. And he said, yes, I think I know the answer. You'll have to come back tomorrow, because what you need is a ring, a golden ring with 4 words in it. I've got the ring. I'll put the 4 words on it. Come back tomorrow and take it and put it on the finger of your father. And so what was said happened. She waited 24 hours, he came back, and in a little wooden box there was a ring, and in the ring on the inside there were 4 words. And she took that ring and she went back and she sat down and she got on one knee and she looked up at her father, who hadn't moved, who was just stood there, full of the grief that had stopped the spring and for him was stopping time. And she picked up his hand and she put the ring on her finger, and just then a rainbow came from across the way. And it was the first glint of anything that wasn't dreary and grey and cold and wet. And everybody in the kingdom looked up and they saw the rainbow, and a little hope came into their hearts. And the king looked at his daughter, but in the face of his daughter he saw his wife, her mother. And somewhere and somehow it was said that you have to deal with grief, but it mustn't be all consuming. It doesn't matter how good things are, it can always get better. It doesn't matter how bad things are, they can always get worse. And he picked up the ring and he stood up. And as he stood up, a ray of sun came down through. And from the winter came the spring. And the little flowers that came up, the daffodils and the things. And so life rolled on. And his son was there, and the three of them ruled the kingdom for a bit. And then he died, and time passed, and the new king came to be. And the 4 words that were on the inside of the ring that helped him in that moment, that help us all sometimes. All this will pass. Right, so that was the one that sprung to mind. I've got a difficult club to do tomorrow night because one of the people in the club, as I quote nowadays, someone who's become my friend recently in the last few years, and it's an Afro-American. He lives in Washington, in America, and he said that Sheila had passed from being one of us to being an ancestor. And it's a lovely phrase, and I use it from time to time now. And so Sheila, our friend from the club, has gone to be an ancestor. And tomorrow we have to tell a story in her honor. And I'm just deciding which one to tell. So I was going through some of the stories, and this one came up, and that's why I told it tonight. But when I look across what's happening, you just wonder what's going to happen next, I think. Anyway, so we're going to go to Jim next, then Keith, then Paul, then Julian, and we'll take it on from there. Now, Jim, I was going to mention that you were going to follow me, and before I told the story, but I didn't get round to it. So I'm going to tell you now that you're going to do the next story, so you're going to follow me. So that will give you a chance just to think for a second.
I appreciate that. It gives me plenty of time to prepare. Okay.
Yeah, plenty, absolutely. As a seasoned campaigner, I know that you'll forgive me. But we have one, Liz Weir and I had one question for you.
Yeah.
Because how do you pronounce your surname?
Brulee.
Brulee.
As in the dessert. And
as
very,
in the dessert. Right.
Very, very briefly, because there's always a story, right? Where my father was from, it was pronounced Bruley, up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And when he married my mother, whose first name was Sally, she said, "There is no way in hell I will ever be Sally Bruley." And she restored the accent to the last name and restored it to its rightful pronunciation, Brule. So anyway.
Right, so we're going to go to Jim Brule, and then after that is going to be Keith, and then Paul, then Julian, and then we'll make a list as we go further down. So over to Jim Brule from Penn State?
From upstate New York. Up in the Great Woods. In the Great Woods.
Up in the Great Woods.
I have a story that is new to me that I'm diving deeply into, and I'd like to share it with you. I think it also happens to fit our time. And I'll say this is a story that started over 2,000 years ago in India. We have records of the hero of this story being painted and carved into stone. And then it moved from India, it moved up to Pakistan and Afghanistan. It followed the Silk Road across China and ended up in Japan about 500 years ago. So it's an amazing story that has changed every place it goes. But I'm going to tell you the origin story. And this is about the Yakshini Hariti. Now, for those of you unfamiliar, a Yakshini is kind of a force of nature Not quite a demon, not quite a god or goddess, but a very, very powerful person who gets their energy and their power from nature. And this particular Yakshini, whose name is Hariti, was first known for her prodigious fertility. I mean, this woman had 500 children. Now, never mind how she had them. The point was she had them. She had 500 children. She loved them all. And if you think about motherhood and what raising children means, that means she had to feed 500 children. Not an easy task for anyone. Well, Hariti thought, what better to feed my children than other children? You know, she wasn't human, and this seemed to make good sense to her. So in the area of India that she lived, she started collecting children and killing them and feeding them to her children. Now, again, you don't have to be a math wizard to realize that if you've got to feed 500 children every day, you're going to be taking a lot of children from the surroundings. And soon she was just kidnapping all the children, sometimes just as they were born, sometimes as they were found hiding in the woods, and the whole region was decimated by her hunger for the children that she loved. Well, the parents, everyone, the adults, were bereft. They didn't know what to do. At that time, Buddha was alive, and they went to Buddha. And they said, you've got to help us. We have no children, and it's just terrible. And the Buddha said, well, what is it you want me to do? And they said, take care of her, get rid of her, do whatever you have to do to her to make her stop. We can't tolerate this. And the Buddha thought about it. And he put on his beggar's clothes, and he took his beggar's bowl, and he headed to her home. And when he arrived at her home, he said, do you have anything you could feed me? And she said, well, I'll go get you something. Here, watch after my children. And as soon as she left, he took his beggar's bowl and he put it over one of her 500 children and sat on it. A little while later, she came back and she counted her children and she realized one is missing. And she said to him, I think one of my children is missing. And the Buddha said, well, maybe you better go look for him. And she tore off in great agony and despair and fear, searching everywhere, flying through the air, racing through the rivers, doing everything she could do to find her child, and she couldn't find him. Until finally she came back, absolutely bereft, her heart broken, tears streaming down her face, and she said to the Buddha, I don't know what to do. One of my children is lost. And the Buddha said to her, can you imagine what it feels like? You, who have 500 children and has lost one of them, what it feels like for these people who have 1, 2, maybe 3 children and they've lost all of them. And the way he spoke to her broke her heart open. And she realized what she had done. And she said, what can I do? How can I possibly change my life to make up for this terrible thing I've done? And the Buddha said, well, there's 2 things you must do. First of all, you must stop taking children. You cannot do that anymore. And the second thing you must do is you yourself must become a vegetarian. And in fact, more than a vegetarian, the only thing you can eat from now on is pomegranates, because pomegranates will remind you of the flesh that you were eating and of the blood that was streaming when you ate them, but you can only eat pomegranates. And she said, I will, I promise, but how will I feed my children? And the Buddha approached his disciples and said, your job from now on is to feed these 500 children. Feed them with the same diet you eat, but take care of these children. And so it was. And from that, Hariti became the devourer to the protector of children. And her story moves from there to Afghanistan.
Oh, Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. That was absolutely like a good red wine. The older you are, the better you get. Right, so we're going to go to Keith next. After Keith is Paul, and then after Paul is Julian.
I'm
Keith in Wolverhampton. Sorry, yes.
sort
I
of
think Keith
assuming that means
Middleton's in.
this Keith. Yeah, he's crept in the corner. Always good to see.
Yeah, no. It's good to see him back, yeah.
I'd like to take you to China. To China many, many years ago. And there are two towns, one called Yangtze and one called Yanqiong. And between the towns, there is a river. Now, it's bigger than a brook, but not a great torrent. And there is a stone bridge over the river between the towns. And both towns grow melons. Now, the people from Yangtze grow the most beautiful, succulent melons that you could possibly wish for. For they know when to plant the seed at exactly the right time. They know how much to water it, how much to fertilize it. They know to put the straw down, to protect it from impromptu frosts. They know exactly the right time to harvest. You could stand on the edge of their field and you could smell the perfume of the perfect melon. And people came from far and wide to buy their melons from them. Far and wide, in fact, so many that there was never enough melons for everyone who came. So they would cross the bridge disgruntled and buy the melons from Yanqiong. Now, Yanqiong people didn't have those skills that have been passed down from family to family, and nor did they apply themselves in the same way. Now, and their melons were okay. Their melons were edible. The melons were probably a bit like the one you find in the supermarket now, I suppose. They were juicy enough, but they were very much second best. And the people of Yanqiong became disgruntled because the people who bought their melons were put out because they didn't get the best ones. The people from Yangtze got the best prices and their town prospered and there were cafes and even a theatre. Whereas Yanqiong, it was okay, it was reasonably prosperous. They made a living, but there were only a couple of cafes and bars. And they could look across the bridge and they could see this prosperous place and they could hear the grumblings of the people who came to buy their melons. And you know how it is with people who are unsatisfied with their lives. They want to blame. They want to blame. And talk went around about, Yangtze, those people in Yangtze. They must have put some kind of ancient curse on us. They've cursed our melons. And people sat in bars and drank alcohol and grumbled. And dissent and alcohol don't go well together. For one night, a band of them, a big band, got their machetes and hoes, and they crossed the bridge as the moon was high, and you could see the field after field of melons, and they went on the rampage, and they smashed and crashed and trampled and cut up every melon in the fields of Yangtze. And they stood at the end with their hearts beating for the hysteria that had taken them over, and they realized what they had done. But there is no taking back destruction. And they made their way quietly back over the bridge, ashamed, and they sat in their homes waiting for retribution, for surely the people of Yangtze would wake up and find their destroyed crops, and they would be held to account. That is what happened. They were up at the crack of dawn to tend their melons, and they looked aghast. They looked aghast at the chaos of mayhem. Not a single melon had survived the last night's ramblings. And they knew who the perpetrators were. And the anger swelled up on them, and they got their hatchets and they got their pitchforks and they got all their sharp tools and size, and the crowd grew louder and louder and louder until one voice spoke up. One voice spoke up and said, "This is not how we do things." And they tried to shout him down. Look what they've done. Look what they've done. It's bound to be the people from Yangkong. They're jealous of us. They're jealous of us. We have perfect melons. They're hopeless. This is not the way we do things, he said. When we take big decisions, we always go to the wise one. And a man lived in a cottage at the edge of the town, inevitably. And a delegation of 4 and 5 went to his home, and they knocked on the door and they walked in. And all at once, all speaking at once, they told him what had happened. They told him about their anger. They told him about who the perpetrators were, and they said what they were going to do. And he sat quietly and listened while they ranted and raved, and then they calmed down because the person they were ranting and raving at was sitting quietly in a chair, waiting for them to stop. A better way, he said. A better way, they said, a better way. You smash their melons, there are no melons. How about you show them how to grow melons like yours? They were shocked. Why should you not? Their anger comes from how they feel about what they grow. You all know how to make the perfect melons. Why don't you show them? Why don't you cross the bridge now with your straw and your planters and all your cultivating equipment? They will be terrified. They will expect you to come with your clubs and knives and attack them. Why not shock them with your behavior? And they went back to the mob, who had calmed down a lot now with that time they'd had to wait. And they were annoyed. They were annoyed because they wanted to go over with their knives and their clubs and seek retribution, but they knew what the wise one had said made sense, and they gathered up straw and they gathered up their planters and they gathered up all their equipment, and they marched over the bridge. And the people in Yangkong hid in their houses and looked out of the windows and waited for them to burst in and seek retribution. But they marched past their houses, down through the street. Everyone watched amazed. No chanting, no anger, no shouting. They marched into their melon fields. They began to put down straw in some places and water in others and clear the weeds that have been neglected in other parts. And soon a huge crowd of people from Yankom gathered and watched. And one of the melon growers left the others to work and walked over and said, "Now we will show you how to grow melons like ours, and we will live side by side." And they were ashamed and they apologized, and he put his hand up because you couldn't apologize for what they had done anyway. But from then on, both towns grew wonderful melons, and the people came from far and wide, and there were always plenty because there were two towns growing, well, not both perfect melons, but certainly almost. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith from Wolverhampton. So just before Julian, Paul's going to be next then, Julian. Just before we do that, so who's in the World Storytelling Cabinet? I can't quite see.
Rona.
Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah. How come? Blah 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 blah. How did you manage to get there?
By invitation, as always, Mike. I've been here all week telling stories.
All right. Okay. Cool. Right.
Cafe, yeah.
Right. Say hello to Walid for me.
Walid, Mike says hi.
Yeah. Where is he? Come on.
We all say hi.
All say hi to Walid. Yeah, I know. You can see us on the big screen, probably. All say hello. Hello, Walid. All right. So,
and real quick, Keith,
right, so,
could you write the name of the two villages in the chat? Keith from Wolverhampton.
Keith, can you write the names of the villages in the chat for Baba? Okay. So we're going to go to Paul and then Julian. So Paul from Cumbria. So Cumbria is that bit of England just above the Welsh marshes, same side, but below Scotland.
Good evening or good morning, wherever we are. I'm going to tell you a tale of Cumbria tonight, actually. And this is a true story, or is it? It's a mystery. It's going back not so many thousands of years, but certainly a decade or so. And quite who the people involved are is closely guarded for good reason when you hear the end of it. So we have this pastime in Cumbria, and it's begun in spring on the 1st of April, where we trail hounds. Now, for those of you around the country who may or may not trail hounds, this is going back hundreds of years, and it was originally to keep these dogs fit. But I was inspired to tell this one by a small horse race that happened yesterday, known as the Grand National here in the UK, where apparently a bet went crazily wrong and somebody put £100,000 on at 8-1 and they won. And that bookmaker has gone away in somewhat disgrace, shall we say it, having taken the bet. Well, hound trailing in Cumbria is really about breeding your hounds, looking after your dogs, but also seeing which one might perhaps be the fastest. And again, whether a little bit of money might, I'm sure betting doesn't take place where Baba see where you are, but maybe you choose your hound to see which is the fastest, and maybe a little bit of money will pass over when the betting fields are over. Now, there's a long tradition of hound trailing. And the trail themselves, the hounds race over the hills, they race over the fells, as we call them, but they're not just running aimlessly. They are following a concoction. They are following a sack, which is dragged by a man, and the sack is doused in turpentine, aniseed, and paraffin. So it's a pungent mix. So you have to imagine this being dragged for up to 10 miles over the hills, and the dogs chase these. And there was one hound breeder, and he loved his hounds, but he had never won the race. This is old Jake. He had never won, and he was laughed at by the other breeders because they said, "You're never going to win. You just can't. You can't feed them right. There must be something. Maybe you're not telling them stories well enough at night, but your hound never wins." And after years of hearing this, he thought there has to be a chance. There has to be a way that I can prove the other farmers nearby, the other breeders wrong. And on the day of one of the many trails, and they happen from the 1st of April through until October each year. And on this particular day, old Jake realized there was a way that his beloved Jess, his beloved hound Jess, could come in first. And he thought there might even be a way that if he got his son to bet on the dog for him, that this might be the chance to win. So the race began. The trail had already been laid, as we said, for 10 miles. The pungent smell, even to humans, was there, very strong. And the various hounds set off. And his dog Jess had often come in 3rd or even 4th, but never won. And on this particular day, there were the usual suspects, the usual other farmers with their dogs. There was Borrowdale Lass, there was Arrow, there was Jet. Even the names suggest that these are winning hounds. And all the dogs were let off from the same position, and they all followed the trail, and they ran and they ran and they ran. And as usual, Jet and Arrow and Borrowdale Lass were running faster and faster, and poor Jake's hound was running its usual 4th position. But Jake had come up with a cunning plan. He knew which way the trail was going to lead, and the trail was going to go underneath a cliff face. And by the side of the cliff face, a large rock was sticking out, a large rock big enough for Jake to hide behind. And hide behind he certainly did. And as he did so, the dogs are running faster and faster. The excitement, you hear them baying, "Ow, ow," as they raced along. And the first hound, clearly not his own, ran by. And yes, this was Borrowdale Lass, was in the lead as usual. And as Borrowdale Lass, following the trail of aniseed, turpentine and paraffin, ran past, Jake leapt out from behind the rock and waved a link of sausages at Borrowdale Lass. Borrowdale Lass was instantly distracted and went over to Jake, at which point Jake, ever so lovingly but ever so firmly, gripped Borrowdale Lass by the collar and tied Borrowdale Lass behind the rock. And fed Borrowdale Lass a sausage or two. Not cruel by any means. The next Jet, racing along maybe 100 yards or so, dashed near to the rock, and suddenly Jake leapt out again, waved a link of sausages at Jet, and drew Jet in behind the rock, held the collar, tied him up, and gave a sausage or two. The third hound to be coming along, this was Arrow, still zooming along way ahead of Jake's own hound, came past. Jake appeared behind the rock, waved the sausages, and pulled in Arrow, held Arrow by the collar, tied Arrow up, and fed Arrow a sausage or two. Finally, Jake's own hound, Jess, in 4th place as usual, raced on past, and suddenly smelt the sausages, appeared towards Jake, at which point Jake, not so lovingly, employed his boot and suggested to Jess that Jess should carry on the trail anyway, and that no sausages were coming Jess's way. Now, Jess knew Jake's boot, not very often, but knew enough that the boot meant business, and so instead followed on the trail. Other slower hounds were hundreds of yards behind, but Jake sat with the 3 normally winning hounds, fed them a couple more sausages each, and then realized that they were rather thirsty. So Jake offered them a special drink as well that he had concocted behind the rock. They drank well, they ate more sausages, and finally, after a respectable 20 minutes or so, Jake let the hounds free, and they licked him, thankful for the sausages, and then joined back onto the trail. Now, in the final finishing ground where all the hounds raced in and the usual betting is going on, there sat Jake's son. Over the hillside, finally at last, came not Jet, not Arrow, not Borrowdale Lass, but Jess. Much to the amazement of all the other dog handlers, where were their dogs? Where were their dogs? And Jess raced down into the showground to victory, the victory of her life. And Jake's son greeted her in. And then perhaps 20 minutes later, Jet and Arrow and Borrowdale Lass came slightly slowly over the hillside and in a very sort of diagonal sort of path as well, not their usual straight as an arrow way. And they finally came into the showground to their own handlers, who were waiting with their usual treats and food for them. And curiously, on this day, the dogs were not in the least bit hungry. They had no interest in the treats that were being offered. And in fact, instead, they just seemed to go round and round and round and then fell asleep. And at the end of the day, Jake wandered over to the showground and met his son. And on that day, he went home with his pockets rather fuller of money than they usually were at the end of a betting session. But that bottle of whiskey in his pocket was rather emptier than it had been at the start of the day, and he had not a sausage on him. And that is the apparently true tale of how Jess finally won victory for Jake in Cumbria. And it is very well hidden. It is apparently true, but clearly with skullduggery like that, nobody is going to own up.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, Paul, but I've got a couple of questions for you. The first one is, where's Dido and Bendigo, and where's Countess and Traveller?
They would be there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're missing them already. And those of you, it's a very famous song from Cumbria to do with hunting, that's the chorus to and everything else. And I don't know what happens up in Aintree at the Grand National, but 100,000 quid as a bet is a small bet at Cheltenham, where the Cheltenham Gold Cup. Julian and I are both nodding at each other. We know. I know one person had a bet at $1 million down at the gold. So they say. Not that I know them personally, but that is reputed to have happened more than once. Okay, on the Gold Cup. So that Grand National isn't a very big event, really. I don't think.
I didn't know dogs got the itis.
Oh, didn't you?
I didn't know dogs got the itis.
They
and
got
for
itis.
Those that don't know what the itis is, that's after you've eaten a big meal and the only thing you want to do is curl up and go to sleep. Yeah. So I didn't know they got. It's just like in the United States after Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, a lot of people, especially in the African American community, the only thing we want to do is just lay back and nod out. We call that the itis.
The itis,
yeah.
Right.
Well, don't tell the vets in the UK that that's called the itis, because they'll charge you for it. Okay.
It does sound like something you would go. It does sound like something
my dog's got itis. To better say, oh, that's 10 quid or 50 quid. I'll come and have a look. Don't worry about it.
I was going to say, if you go to a vet that can't charge you 10 quid for anything, I want to know their address.
Well,
why the vets send dresses?
Right, it was a toothbrush, Julian.
Oh, fair enough.
Anyway, talking to Julian from which village do you say just south of Stratford-on-Avon?
Yeah, Shipston on Stour, about halfway between Stratford-on-Avon and Morton-in-Marsh. And if anybody's got any words more English than that, I'd love to hear them. Basically.
So you know the police at Brefferton?
I do. I do indeed.
Yes, obviously a well-travelled cultured young man, and anybody from away or anybody who doesn't know that particular drinking little watering hole, I'll be happily everybody I can see on this screen, I would happily take you there too. So, right, Julian from Shipston on Stour.
Thank you very much. Well, this is a story that I found in a book that I found in a secondhand bookshop a few weeks ago, and it's which is always a lovely way to find new stories, and because this was first written down in 1940, I thought about kind of changing some of the details to it, but I think I shall I think I shall keep them as they are with in a way of paying respect to the original writer of this. And it concerns a man who one sunny morning is sitting in his breakfast nook, eating his scrambled eggs, when he looks up into his garden and sees a unicorn eating roses, a white unicorn with a golden horn. Well, this is quite unusual. So he goes upstairs to the bedroom where his wife is still asleep, and he wakes her up. She's not very happy to be woken up, but then they don't have the sort of relationship where she's very happy about anything at all, I'm sorry to say. And so when he says to her, "There's a unicorn in the garden, eating roses," she says to him, "Oh, and there's a loser in the bedroom waking me up. Go away. You are a booby, and I'm going to have you carted off to the booby hatch." Well, the man doesn't really like that sort of phraseology at best of times, particularly not on a lovely summer's morning when there's a unicorn in his garden. So he goes downstairs and goes gently out into the garden where the unicorn has finished the roses and is now making its way merrily through the tulips, and pulls up a lily and offers it to the unicorn. So, "Here, unicorn, have a lily." And the unicorn looks at him and gravely eats the unicorn with perhaps the slightest degree of thanks in its eyes. But a unicorn is a very noble beast, and, will it unbend that much? Maybe not. So the man goes back in, moving very carefully so as not to disturb the unicorn, and goes back up to his wife and wakes her up again. "It's still there," he says. "It ate a lily this time." "If you wake me up once more," she says, "I am definitely going to have you certified. Now go away." So he goes back downstairs and goes out into the garden and sees that the unicorn has now gone. But in the wonderful aura of peace and tranquility and wonder that has been conjured by this encounter with this marvelous animal, he sits down on his lawn. After a while, he lies down and just contemplates the world and the clouds slowly scudding across the sky above him. And he feels a wonderful feeling of peace and serenity. Upstairs in the bedroom, however, his wife is feeling not at all peaceful or serene. In actual fact, she's actually seen an opportunity for something that she's been trying to get hold of for quite a long time. And she makes a couple of phone calls and basically calls the local psychiatrist and says, "Get here quickly and bring a straitjacket." So after a few minutes, this duly happens because, to be perfectly honest, this is one of those things which probably in the real world would take weeks, but this is a story. So anyway, so the psychiatrist and a couple of orderlies, big guys in white coats, appear. And she meets them at the door and says, "Oh, thank goodness you've come. Come in quickly." She closes the door behind them and sits them down in the lounge and says, "My husband said he saw a unicorn this morning. He said he was feeding it lilies in the garden." So the psychiatrist said, "I see. Did he say anything else about the unicorn?" Yes, says the woman. He said it had a golden horn." "I see. And what would you like us to do with it about that?" He says, "Why, I'd like you to take him off to the loony bin straight away." "Well, we don't really use those words anymore," began the psychiatrist. "But no, come on, he's ridiculous. He's dangerous," said the woman. "So just wait here," said the psychiatrist, "and I'll just quickly go and talk to him, shall I?" And he went out into the back garden, where the man was quietly lying with his head in his hands, still watching the sky very happily and peacefully. He says, "Excuse me, did you tell your wife there was a unicorn in the garden today?" The man looked at her. "Of course not. The unicorn's a mythical beast. They don't exist, do they?" "Why, thank you," said the psychiatrist. "That's all I needed to know." And the man lay back down and listened to the sounds that were coming from the other side of the house as his wife was bundled into an ambulance. And after the ambulance had driven away, he got back up, went into the kitchen, spent a fairly peaceful day making himself coffee. moral of the story is don't count your boobies until they're hatched. Thank you.
Well, Julian, I'm just taking notes. Okay.
And the credit for that one goes in actual fact to James Thurber. So I must thank him. If you don't know his writing, he's always funny and he's always very sharp and acerbic. So he's well worth seeking out. So I was delighted to find that one by him. But yes.
Right, so we're going to Baba, and then from Baba it's Abita, and Abita to Eleanor. Now I've had a message from Keith from Lincolnshire, so that's the message has landed, Keith. So I understand that bit, and then we'll see what Mona's up to. But so we're going to go to Baba next, and then Abita. Okay.
Okay, so originally I was going to tell the story as I heard it, but being me, I went, wait a minute, I see another change, another turn on this. So I heard the story on one of the World Storytelling Cafe's sessions, but I don't recall who told the story. So if you know the original story about the frog that climbed the tree, please drop it in the chat so I can give proper acknowledgement in the future. But I've changed the story a little bit. So I'm going to not do my long time ago part. I'm going to get right into the story. And this story has been modified to fit the American South. Now, I want y'all to listen here carefully, because a long time ago, way before man came around, the animals could talk to each other. They were kind of laying out their territory. You know, the birds had the sky, the snakes had the ground and the burrows underneath, all that kind of stuff. Well, there were ponds, rivers and streams, but mostly ponds. And there was a proliferation of animals in the ponds, mostly frogs and toads. Now, this is way back when they kind of looked a lot alike, but there were too many of them for the ponds. And it was really crowded in there, so I'm told. Anyhow, they was getting on each other's nerves. They were fitting to have a great big battle. They were fitting to go to war. And what is war good for? Absolutely nothing. Oh, wait a minute, that's somebody else. Anyhow, so they decided to have a contest. And the contest was between the frogs and the toads, whichever one of them could climb to the highest branches in a particular tree, they would get to decide who would live in the pond and who would live on the land. And they thought that was a good idea. So they both got their champions together, and they gave to this great big tree. Now, some people say it was a baobab tree, but baobab trees don't grow in United States of America. So I'm not sure what kind of tree it was, but I'm going to tell you, it was awesome. It branched out all over the place, pun intended. Well, came the big day. The other animals were gathered around to watch this great thing, and the frogs and the toads looked so much alike, it was kind of hard to tell them apart. But anyhow, the signal was given, and the champions from the toads and the champion from the frogs began to climb the tree. Now, the tree was not easy to climb, and toads and frogs are not made for climbing trees. So, but they started, and some slipped. They started, some slipped, and they were determined. They kept getting up and getting up and getting up. Now, you know how it is when you have a contest of sort, or you're setting out to prove a point. There's always somebody around to discourage you. And there were some of the snakes said, y'all might as well stop now, because none of y'all gonna get up that tree. And some of the other animals, the beaver said, this is foolish. I mean, yeah, this is foolish. We're going back to building dams. And they were hearing all that, and they were being discouraged left and right. And they would climb that tree, and they kept hearing people say, y'all can't do this. And some of them began to believe it because it was so difficult trying to climb that tree. And one by one, they began to give up. The toads and the frogs. One by one, they listened to the birds, they listened to the bears, they listened to all kind of animals telling them why they couldn't climb. I mean, the bird said, hey, everybody knows those frogs and toads can't climb trees. Y'all wasting our time. And one by one, they got discouraged, and they started climbing the tree. And they stopped climbing, and finally there was one frog and one toad left, and they were climbing and they were climbing, and the birds started flying around. The hummingbirds, because they don't know the words, the hummingbirds started going, you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. And the toad heard and stopped climbing the tree. But the frog kept on climbing and climbing and climbing. He climbed so far up in the tree, when he finally stopped climbing, he was right next to a nest. Now, I don't know what kind of birds were in there, but I'm not going to make a joke about eggs, because then the yolk would be on me, and I'm not going there. Well, the toad climbed up and looked around, and everyone was shouting and giving him praise. The frog, rather. But there was, and the frog came on back down kind of slowly. And everybody was shouting and hollering, and he just kind of looked left, and he looked right, and he wrote down on the ground, why y'all shouting? See, it turned out this particular frog was deaf. He couldn't hear nothing, or some people say nothing. And because he couldn't hear the people shouting and trying to discourage him, he was able to accomplish his goal. Now, there's a moral in this story, but first let me tell you something else that happened. So on that day after the frogs won, the frogs declared, "We shall live in the ponds and the streams, and y'all toads got to go live on the land." Well, the toads weren't happy about that, but a deal's a deal and a word's a word. And so they climbed out the pond, and every now and then they dipped their toes in there, but they climbed out the pond. They began to live on the land, and sometimes climb a tree or two, or a bush or something, but that's what they did. And over time, because they were no longer in the water, their skin began to change. It got rougher. Some people say it got browner, but that's another story. I'm not getting into that. And the frogs, they were in the water, but because they were in the water so much, their skin got smooth, some got bumpy, and they started turning colors, and they kind of got green and stuff. But they were very happy living in the pond. But they didn't have an agreement with them, because you see, toads and frogs, they lays their eggs in the streams. But they do it a little bit differently. Frogs lay in clusters, and toads lay in streams. No pun intended. Well, but the moral of this story, because I had to get back to that. I hadn't forgotten. I had to get back to that. The moral of the story is simply this. You see, that frog was able to accomplish his dreams because he couldn't hear people discouraging him. He couldn't hear all the why you couldn't do it. He couldn't hear the naysayers. He couldn't hear all the people trying to keep him from doing what he had set his mind on. And that's often like life. See, a lot of times when you want to accomplish things like become a prolific story like Mike Rust or Julian Burnell or the rest of us, there are people around you telling you why you can't do that. Telling you, no, get a real job, do that on the side. They're trying to discourage you, But don't listen to them. If you have a dream, if you have a desire, if you have passion, follow your dreams, follow your passions, make a plan, set your goals, and then follow them. Because dreams can come true, but only if you are determined to, with a plan, and you don't deny yourself no. I mean, let me try that again, take two. And you deny yourself no. Remember, yes is a no that's been dispensed. Follow your dreams, follow your passions. Don't listen to the naysayers. Asante. Oops. I stepped on a pin, the pin bent, and that's the way that story went.
Absolutely. So you are talking to a person who sat here living his dream, so that's fine. So
I was discouraged about becoming a storyteller. I used to be, in the 70s, we had a poetry renaissance, or as you say, renaissance, in Washington, D.C., and I was known as that poet to act out his stuff. And people kept discouraging me about being a poet, about being an actor. But I had good sense or common sense and didn't listen, because common sense is rare. And here I am today, internationally acclaimed and in the Guinness World Records. Yay! Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you are. And Baden agrees with everything you've just said. Okay.
Baden agrees? Oh, that is deep honor.
So we said we're going to Evita, then after Evita. So Rona, are you telling a
I'm
story
right here,
tonight?
you know. I haven't gone anywhere.
We can only hope, but thank you, Baden.
I knew you were
I'm,
there, Baden. Don't you
I'm
worry. I can
nearly,
put.
I'm nearly home. Another 5 minutes or so, I'll be home. I've got a short one for you later on, if I got time.
Okay, lovely to hear from you. And I knew you'd endorse what I said, Baden. Don't worry about it. So Rona, are you telling a story tonight? Put your hand up if you are.
A wee short one.
Okay, what time is it in Marrakesh?
Same as UK.
Same as the UK.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Right, so Wally can get his bus in about 8 o'clock. Yeah, right, cool, we've got it. So Evita, we're going to you, and then we're going to Emma.
I wonder if Baba C's story is like an indication of if you were on your small tiny phone on public transport, wondering what story you should tell, and then want to keep it for the global story round, to which I hope you're all coming next Sunday. I've decided on a different story, and I just didn't know. And I'm scrolling, suddenly this story pops up. And should you tell a story that you've just found 3 hours ago? Probably not. But I'm amongst friends here.
But of course you should. A story well told was like a meal well served.
Yeah, well, we'll see how well it's told, because, you know, I'm just going to fly here. So this story also somehow fits into our times. It was written down in 1887 by a very famous author. This is the riddle. You have to tell me at the end who it was. And the gist of the story, why this story was actually written down by this person, is that peasants in those days had a big aversion to being dragged into the king's battles. They didn't like being soldiers. So let's go. Lie, la, lie, 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 la, lie, 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 la, lie, la, 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 la. Well, a long time ago, there was a peasant, a poor peasant, who had just come back from his work, and as he walked home, he almost stepped on a frog, but he managed to avoid it and stepped over it. He kept walking when he heard a voice behind him. Emelian, what are you doing? It was a beautiful voice, and when he turned around, there was a beautiful girl. She said, Emelian, why are you not married? He said, look at me. All I've got is this dirty old clothes. I cannot afford to get married. And she said, why not? You could marry me. He looked at this beautiful creature and said, but if I did, where would we live? Do not bother about that. If you sleep a bit less and work a bit more, surely you can house and feed yourself. So Emelian quite eagerly agreed. Where shall we live? We shall live in town, she said, and at the edge of town they found a small hut. And Emelian worked hard, and they were happy. But it so happened that one afternoon, the king's carriage came by the house when Emelian's wife was out in the garden. He looked out the window. Stop the cart. He looked out. He saw this picture of a young woman. He actually got out of the cart and said, come here, young woman. She curtsied, my king. He says, who are you? I'm Emelian's wife, she said. But you're so beautiful. Surely someone of your beauty should be queen. Oh, thank you for your kind words, but I'm actually quite happy just being Emelian's wife. Goodbye. And she turned around and left. Well, the king went back to the palace. But his passion had been awakened. He could not sleep. He tossed and turned. He had to have that woman, did he not? So he asked for his steward and his advisors to come and saying, you have to find a way for me to have Emelian's wife. How do I do that? That's easy, they said. We shall give him a job in the court as a yardsman or something, and we will work him so hard until he dies, and then she's a widow, and then you can have her. Great idea, go forth and do it. So they called for Emelian that he would from now on have a job at the court, and he should come and live there with his wife. The next morning, Emelian turned up dutifully without his wife. Why did you not bring your wife? She's got a house already to look after. Tell me what I have to do. Well, they gave him the work for 2 men, but somehow he managed to do all that work. So they said, come back tomorrow and we will give you the work of 4 men. Do you understand? Emelian understood, and he went home, and his wife had supper ready, and she says, darling, how was your day? He says, it was hard. It was really hard work, and tomorrow it's going to be twice as hard. I think they want to kill me. She says, don't mind about that. All you have to do is get up a bit earlier and work a bit longer. It'll be just fine, trust me. So the next day he went back, and the next day and the next day, and they gave him more and more work, and quite by a miracle, Emelian always managed to finish the jobs. Now the king, after a week, was not very happy, as you can imagine, because his passion had not subsided. So he said to them, what do I feed you for? He seems strong, or his wife is a witch or something. Do something else. Said his steward. Why don't we give him harder work, like skilled work? Surely he can't do that. He's just a peasant. Well, they did. But of course, Emelian fulfilled all the tasks in good time. The king was really vexed, and he began to throw one of his tantrums. You can just imagine these days what a king's tantrum looks like, and said, do something. Well, you could ask him to build you a new temple in 1 day, or you'll chop off his head, and then you can have his wife. Good idea, said the king. They told Emelian, and Emelian went home and said, we have to run away. I cannot build a whole temple in 1 day. Oh dear, said his wife. You just go have your supper and lie down. Everything will be just fine. Just trust. You'll get up a bit earlier and work a bit harder. And the next morning, as he awoke, she handed him a hammer and a nail. She says, it's basically done. You just have to go and finish. It's a day's work. So he did it. And when the king looked out at sunset, there was a gorgeous new temple. Well, this cannot be, said the king. How did he do that? The stewards by now were quite sick of Emelian's talents as well and wanted to get rid of him. So they said, why don't you ask him, now he's tired already, that he has to, by tomorrow morning, make a river around the new temple with boats on it, mind you. And if he doesn't do it, you shall chop off his head. The king, who's probably named John, it's a pity he's not here, the king liked that idea. Emelian went home and whined to his wife, and she says, husband, don't be so sad all the time. Go to sleep and it shall be done. The next morning, when he woke up, she gave him a spade, and she said, all that's left to do at sunrise, there's just one little mound left. You just level that just as the sun comes up. Now imagine, my friends, when the king looked out, the eager, passionate king, looked out the window, what did he see? He saw Emelian just flattening a last mound, and there, around the beautiful temple, was meandering a river with boats on it. That's it! The king was so vexed. I think I'm going to have your heads chopped off. You have got no good ideas. You must find a way. So one of the servants said, Sire, I do, Your Majesty, have one idea. You must set him an impossible task, and then we shall be able to kill him for not obeying and not fulfilling the task. Tell him to go there, you know not where, to bring back, you know not what. That's a very good idea. It could have been one of my own ideas, said the king. And they told Emelian, who of course ran back to his wife, lamenting that this was the end of him, that they maybe should run away. The soldiers will always find us, husband, but yes, we must be cunning right now. She sat down and thought, I know. Here is a spindle. You go and find the grandmother of soldiers. She's a relative of mine. You bring her that spindle and you tell her all your troubles. She will help us. And then she helped him to set off on his way that very night. He walked and he walked and he walked, and he came across some soldiers doing a drill, and he said to them, can you help me? What is it that you want? Well, I have to go there, don't know where, and I have to bring back that, but I don't know what. Oh, said the soldiers, we know exactly what you're talking about. Did the king set you up to this? Yes, he said. Well, we always go there, we don't. She was wetting it from tears. She was weeping. When she saw Emelian, She growled at him and says, "What do you want here? I'm busy." He handed her the spindle, and she said, "Ah, it is you. Sit down and tell me what happened." Emelian told her the whole story. She said, "Oh yes, this is very tricky, but it can be done. Here is a ball of thread. You must now go and follow that ball of thread until wherever it goes, until you get to the sea. There will be a town, and you must ask for lodgings for the night in the very last house. And then you will find something that a man will obey more than his own parents. You must seize that thing and bring it back. When you bring it back, the king will say, that wasn't the right place, it wasn't the right thing, and then you shall have to smash it to smithereens and throw it away. Do you understand?" "Yeah, but Granny, how will I know what that thing is?" "You will know," she said, "you will know." So off he set the very next morning after a very good meal. Grandmothers always feed you. And he walked and he walked and he followed that thread and came indeed to the sea. Indeed, he got lodgings at a house where the next morning he saw that a mother was trying to wake up a teenage son. "Come on, get up. Your father's bones are aching. Go and chop us some wood." "No, Mom, I'm still tired. The sun's hardly up. Give me another 10 minutes. You know how it goes." "Please don't be like that. Your father, his bones are so bad. Surely you will not have him suffer like that." The boy just turned over and put the blanket over his head. But then Emelian heard outside. He heard a ruckus and a racket and loud banging. And the young boy stood up, got dressed, and zoomed out. Ah! Emelian followed him, and he saw there was a man that had a weird bucket-like thing that was stretched with a skin hanging off his stomach, and he was banging it with 2 sticks, and he said, "What is this? And who is that?" "This," the people said, "is a drummer, and he's banging a drum." "Is it empty?" "Yes, it is." "Oh, please, may I have it? Please," said Emelian. But as you can imagine, they would not give it to him. So Emelian followed that drummer all day long, until that drummer went to an inn, met Mike Rust, and had a few pints, and fell asleep. Immediately, Emelian grabbed the drum and raced home straight to the palace and said, "Tell your majesty that I've gone there don't know where, and I've brought that don't know what." The king tried to dismiss him. He says, "Well, I'll go inside if he won't come up." The king came out. And he said, "Where have you been?" Emelian told him, "That's not the right place," His Majesty said. "And what have you brought back?" "This," but the king didn't look at it. "That's not what I wanted." "Well," said Emelian, "fine then, so I shall have to destroy it and give it to the devil." And he began to drum it as he walked down towards the river. Ba-da-bum, 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 bum, bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum. Suddenly, soldiers came out of nowhere and lined up next to Emelian, waiting for the orders. When the king saw that his soldiers were all following this young man, he called them, "Come back, don't follow him. Come back to me, come back to me." But they would not listen. They listened to Emelian. The king said, "This is impossible. I cannot be without my army. Go and get Emelian's wife and give her back to him. I'm done with this man." So they did. And then the king said, "Please, please, Emelian, give me that drum." "Oh, I cannot. I have promised that I would destroy it." So he went down to the river and he banged it and banged it and banged it until it burst into smithereens, and he threw the bits into the river. And do you know, I hope all American soldiers hear this, do you know what happened? The soldiers lay down their arms and ran away. Emelian and his wife went back to their little house and lived happily ever after. Who wrote that story down from an old folk tale? Who did it, Mike?
Who wrote the story down?
Yeah, who wrote it? It's an old folk tale from the Volga region, and who was the very famous author that wrote it down?
Hans Christian Andersen.
Nope.
All the
Tolstoy?
Grimm brothers.
Jim, it was good old Leo Tolstoy.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, isn't it?
Okay. Well, he was a very, very.
I just read it this afternoon. Of course, it has to be polished, but you know how we say you have to love a story to tell it, and I loved it straight away. I said, "Yeah, that's for our times too."
And you
Thank
told
you,
it
everyone.
well.
So
You
one of
told
the
it
things,
well.
one of the things I always say is, if you've got a new story you want to practice it, here is
Yes.
the best place to come to.
It is.
Come here
Yes.
and practice it. Absolutely. We've all done it. And if you haven't, you ought to. Now, we're going to Eleanor from Nova Scotia next, but just before then, Eleanor, Barbara and I were going to go and do the parish notices. So next Friday, at the story round for the children, that's the April the 18th is Despina. And after that is someone I don't know. So I hope I get your name right, Dee. It's Dee Palina Sami, who is doing April the 24th. Now, there's a couple of reprobates that are doing some kind of global story round at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. One's called Avita, and the other calls someone I've heard vaguely of. He's called John Rowe.
Yeah,
And,
he has that boat with the motor on it. It doesn't work, so he has to row it ashore.
yeah, so he's been knocking around the scene for years. But and they're doing it at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, so it catches the other side of the people that can't be here at 6 o'clock on a Sunday night. And I hope that takes off for that side of the world, where the sun goes down later and all the rest of it. And I hope it really works well for you, Avita. So you just be consistent with your time, and you know how to do it. I'm sure it'll work out for you. And if I can, I will pop in. But if you ever need any help or anything happens, and you just give a shout out, which what happened the other day when I hear somebody got caught in the traffic jams in Ireland and couldn't get there. The whole community here all stepped up.
Yeah.
And
That
so
was
good luck
Anthony.
with
Anthony,
the enterprise. Okay.
And,
But
and it went very
everything's
well.
fine. It went very well, and everything's fine with Anthony. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we wanted to know. That was the main thing. We wanted to make sure that he
Yeah,
was okay. Did you
Yeah.
mention Catherine?
Catherine.
Did you? Yes. Catherine Brophy.
Brophy's the one after. Yeah.
She's on April 25th.
So who's doing? What's Steve Pellini doing?
She's
Steve
doing
Pellini's
Friday
on-
Stories for Children, April 24th.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So
what's Catherine? Go
Catherine.
On, go on,
Go ahead.
Bella.
No, just
Go
saying
on.
Catherine will be doing Saturday, April 25th, a little bit later, 1:30 p.m. UK time.
Yeah, and you need to. That weekend is the personal stories that Naharika and Rachel Smith are doing about then as well. So keep an eye out for that. I'm not involved in that this time. I shall be listening. I'm not doing one myself. So anyway, we come to the last two ladies of this.
Just briefly, Mike, I'll be in Marrakesh beginning the 22nd, next Wednesday, and staying through the weekend.
Right.
And we're expecting, I don't know what's going to be going on, but obviously we hope to be telling in the cafe and some schools and stuff. So me and Maria Gillen are going to be there for those days.
I know what's going to be going on. You and Marie will be telling brilliant stories and fascinating audiences.
Yeah. And yes.
Okay.
The words defeat me. I'm quite sure that the two of you were going to have a small little glass of something of some
it
kind
might.
as well in the evening.
Wait,
I
who
can
said
see this
small?
happening.
Who said
It's
small?
Well, you know where to go and how to get it, so you'll be fine. And if you need any advice, text me privately, and I'll show you where all the good places are to go.
All right.
And so, Jim, while we've got a second, and Eleanor, just give me a couple of minutes. Jim, what are you doing this side of the pond?
So I'm actually coming in Sunday morning. Maria and Omar Belaraj and I are going up to his community in the High Atlas Mountains. We'll be there a couple nights. Come down to Casablanca and meet Tahir Shah at his place, and then come to Marrakesh for the remainder of the 10 days. So
So you're just over this side of the pond for 10 days. Then you're going
That's
back.
it.
And that's it.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
it. Yeah.
So I
I'll be
was going
back. I'll be back in Ireland and Scotland. Ireland. I'm sorry, back in Ireland in the fall. But that's it.
is that for Cape Clear?
That's for 3 weeks. So I'm doing the Listowel Festival and other things, going up to see Liz. Just doing the 3 weeks of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
Right.
So, Jim, did you say you were going to be high in the mountains or in the mountains high?
Yes.
Okay, good answer.
Right. Jim, I'll text you privately. So, Eleanor, sorry to keep you waiting around. So, and then we're going to Rona. The one thing about doing is the batting order just comes out as I see it. So don't worry about being late or being early. There's no sort of, it doesn't work like that. We've got time for everybody, and everybody will get a chance at having a go at each other. So we're going to Eleanor and Mona, and if Omar's about, we'll grab him as well. But now we're going to Eleanor Benjamin from Nova Scotia, where there is some cracking good tunes been written over the years, I must say.
Oh, I'm so envious about that trip up into the mountains. Doesn't that sound delicious? Anyway, I have a literary fairy tale today, which I found in Jack Sipes' book, Fairy Tales and Fables of Weimar, which is a good place to look for stories in our times. And it was written by Carl Ewald, a Danish writer around in 1920. And he called it A Fairy Tale About God and Kings. And once upon a time, people decided they'd got really fed up with their kings. They decided they would send a delegation to God and ask for his help to get rid of these peevish monarchs. Well, they'd quite forgotten that this was not the first time people had gone to God in search of help against peevish monarchs. Back in the days of Samuel, in a famous book we all know, back in the days of Samuel, the people had come to him and they said, Samuel, we need a king. We do not want to have these two corrupt judges that have been about to be appointed. We want you to go to God and ask for a king. Well, Samuel was not too keen to do this, but he wanted to keep the people happy, so off he went to God, and he said, God, the people have asked me to come and have you appoint a king. God was not amused. He was not amused at all, and he wasn't quite ready to give them a king. Maybe he'd promised one a while back, but they weren't ready for such a king. So he gave Samuel a long list of dreadful things that would happen if they went ahead and appointed a king without his permission. He started in with the list. Well, you know, there will be conscription. Your sons will be required to be charioteers, and they'll be required to make munitions, and your daughters, we're going to turn them into candy makers. Candy makers. And we are going to commandeer your asses for baggage trains. And a lot of other bad things will happen too, said God. We will take away all your best olive orchards and your best vineyards and they will give them to their loyal servants. All these terrible things will happen if they go ahead and appoint a king without my permission. Those horrible things sound a lot like stuff going on now. We're not really forcing daughters to become candy makers so much, and we aren't really commandeering too many asses anymore, but you get the picture. And people are still being forced into slavery. All those horrid things. So Samuel had to go back and tell the people. They didn't pay any attention. God would have given the king one day if they hadn't been so obtuse, and if they had been ready and been obedient and all those things. But none of that happened, and it's all documented for everyone to see today. So in the end, God had said, if you don't do what I say, don't come back asking me for help. So these folks had not remembered that this had taken place thousands of years ago, and back they came with their deputies. They arrived at the pearly gates. They asked for an audience. They were given an audience, and in they came, and they told God, we want to get rid of our kings, God. We want to get rid of them. They're dreadful. They keep going around saying they've been appointed by you, and we're fed up with them. And God said, kings? I don't remember anything about giving you kings. Don't remember a thing. Get out of here. Be off with you. End of audience. Off went the delegates and sat on the steps outside the pearly gates, weeping and moaning and carrying on in such a loud and obnoxious way. Finally, God took pity on them and let them have a second audience. In they came, oh God, we really need your help to get rid of the kings. You don't know what it's like. Well, as I said before, I don't remember anything about giving you kings. But just to make sure, I'll call an archangel. So he called in the archangel and he said, now I want you to go and look in my big book and see if you can find anything where it says I was willing to appoint gods. Off went the archangel. It was a big book. All day the archangel spent with the big book. Couldn't find anything. Came back and told God. God called in the delegates and he said, there's nothing in my records about giving you kings. Farewell, be gone, get out of here. They went back outside and sat down by the pearly gates and began to set up such a clamor. Eventually God took pity on them again. They came back in and made their pleas so strongly. And God called the archangel. He says, go into the archives. There are 12 big books of every plague I have ever visited upon people. I want you to look in there and see if you can find where I gave them kings. Well, that was a big job. The archangel was gone for an entire week. An entire week. When he came back, he said, God, I went through all 12 volumes. Couldn't find a thing. God called back in the delegates. He said, that's it. We've done everything we could. Couldn't find a thing about kings. You're going to have to go home without fulfilling your mission. There's nothing I can do for you. Kings are your own invention. And if you're sick and tired of them, it's up to you to figure out how to get rid of them.
We know a thing or two about getting rid of kings, but that's another story.
Well, we've got lots of stories about kings we have, and we've got another one just coming in the next couple of months or so, because we're sending ours to visit you lot, Baba. So, thank you very much, Ellen, and that was a lovely story, well told. It's lovely to be in your company again. So we're going to go to Rona, and then who sat there in the very place I was a couple of months ago, and in the very place Jim was going to be in a couple of weeks' time, or very shortly, whatever the dates were and everything else. And it's lovely to see you there, and I hope you're having a real good time there, Rona. You're on mute. No, is it?
Thank you very much.
There we go.
Thank you, Lloyd. Oh, it's wonderful, absolutely incredible. Although I do have to say the weather has been unbelievable. biblical terms. We've been driving on roads that look like rivers. It's never happened in the north. These young men have never seen weather like this, but I'm used to it, so I don't mind. Anyway, I'll tell you a very, very short story. We've heard about frogs, and I think 2 different tellers there have mentioned frogs. Very short. 2 frogs always arguing, never could agree. They're supposed to be friends, but no matter where, when, or whatever time of the day, you'll find these 2 frogs, they'll be arguing about something. And today was no different. They decided that they would, each of them would give the other a challenge, and whoever could not complete the challenge would be the winner, and the other would then, from that day forward, have to do what they wanted. So the challenge was, there was a bucket of milk sat in the middle of the barn, and the challenge for the frog was to walk round that bucket without falling in. It's extremely difficult, even harder than climbing trees, Babasi, to walk round the edge of a bucket, because there's nothing to hold on to. And of course, that's exactly what happened. He could not hold on and he fell in. Now, there wasn't a lot, the bucket wasn't full, it only had about less than a third filled with milk. And he couldn't get back out, because every time he tried to climb, it was even harder than climbing a tree, because it was just smooth and wet and slippery. But the more he struggled, the thicker that milk got. And the thicker it got, the more it grew. And he got higher and higher. And by the time that frog got out of that bucket, not only had he got out of the bucket, but he had invented butter. So the next time you put a bit of butter on your toast, you'll know exactly how it was discovered.
Brilliant.
Well, what do you say? Rona, it's lovely for you to be here. So we've got, but I really hope you have a good time. When I was over there, I was pretty much okay. It was colder than I thought it was going to be. So far, I've been lucky so far. So I'm sorry to hear that you've got the monsoon season.
Yeah, it's stopped now. So the next couple of days, it's going to be good, apparently. But I've been here before. I've been here a few times before, Mike, and so I don't mind. The weather doesn't bother me anyway. I've just a great fun at Storytelling Cafe, telling stories every day. It's been grand.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I'm sure you're. Is the hotel is Marrakesh? I'm hearing that Morocco's quite full because of what's happening everywhere else. So yeah,
and loads of people here. It's incredible. Yeah.
Brilliant. Good. I'm really pleased for Mike and Lucy, if that's the case. So we're going to try Baden. Baden, if you're still there.
He hasn't returned yet. I'm check. Oh wait, is iPhone Baden?
Yeah, that's iPhone Baden. So.
Baden, if you're here, you need to speak up.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Great. Okay. I'm still on my phone because logging into the laptop started getting complicated and whatnot, but the phone's kind of tricky. So I'm just going to go on sound if that's okay.
Yeah, do that.
Yep. And this is a very, very short one. I'm tempted to say that the married men here will be able to relate to this, but I don't want to speak for anybody. Yeah. I used to work with a guy called Leroy Johnson, and we called him Lucky Johnson, because West Indian people have got a very kind of ironic sense of humor. And what happened is one day Leroy was leaving work, and he must have been a little bit distracted and wasn't looking where he was going, because he got hit by a truck, slammed into him and knocked him flying. So he rings his wife from the hospital and he says, darling, I'm in a really bad way. I got hit by a truck outside work, and Tina has brought me to the hospital, and I've got a splitting headache. I'm feeling a bit dizzy and giddy, and the doctor's seen me, and they're concerned that, you know, I've got concussion. They're worried about possible brain damage, and it gets worse. I've got like 3 cracked ribs. I've got a fractured pelvis, a dislocated hip, and my left leg is broken in 3 places. It looks like I'm going to have several surgeries to put everything back together and put everything in place, possibly a hip replacement, you know, followed by rehab and extensive physiotherapy. I may never be the same man again. I'm really, really, really concerned. It's looking really bad. And his wife says, "Who the hell is Tina?" There you go.
Yeah.
I
Only
don't-
a single
I'm
man.
sure-
Only a single man would think that's funny.
I'm quite sure whoever Tina was, she was a Turner when it came to beauty. I'll take a moment.
she
I'll
turned
take a
heads.
moment.
Hey guys,
Yeah.
that's
Well
a
what
bit
I'm
told,
about.
Dave, well told.
Yeah, well, lovely. Baden, is always lovely to hear your voice. If we can't see you, that's no problems at all. Do you know there's a very famous song about a note because why I'm not at work today.
No, go for it.
No, you track it down on YouTube. You'll think it's really
Ah.
funny. Yeah, okay. It's quite a long song, and it's really quite good fun along the lines of the one you've just told. So
I'll have a look. Lovely. Thanks.
yeah,
Baden,
Why
you
I'm-
reminded me there's some Leroy Johnson stories on this side of the pond. I have to look them up now. Thank you for the homework assignment.
so I'm sat here in Shropshire tonight, and I've got a backlist somewhere. Keith, I think you're on.
It's Keith.
I think it's Keith. Can you mute yourself, Keith?
Oh, sorry.
There. Right, so I'm just going to wrap it all up now. Thanks for coming. I'll be here in a fortnight's time. For those of you who can make it to Much Wenlock tomorrow night, the club is on. Keith, it's lovely. I know you're here, and I got your messages, and I hope all is well with you. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully. Jim, you and I need to have a chat about something. And I think I've just seen Mike Wood just walk past. Is that Mike Wood sat there? Yes, it is. Hang on, Mike.
Hey,
Hello
Mike.
there.
Hi, hi everybody.
Hello
Hey,
there.
Mike.
Lovely.
Hi,
Yeah,
Mike.
singing Marrakesh soon.
Yeah. So all is good over here. Is all good with you?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and we're using our new tech equipment, by the way. I don't know whether it's as good as Lizard, but it's a lot better than what we used to have.
Well,
Hey, Mike, I sent you a WhatsApp
I am
thing.
so I'm so envious of Liz's kit, Mike. Absolutely, and I've ordered it. It's arriving tomorrow. So I don't know what you've got. I did send you the link. So
Yeah, well, we've got a Waleed. Can you demonstrate the Zoom thing on the camera? The Zoom? Yeah. So Waleed can do all sorts of clever things from where he's sitting now, which he might be able to demonstrate. And there's a microphone for the whole room, which is
yeah.
So, yeah,
Oh,
we had a good
absolutely.
session.
Oh, lovely. Yes. That's exactly the sort of thing Liz was doing. So yeah, absolutely. You seem to have cracked it beautifully. Well done. So that's great.
We got to premiere it when I was in Marrakesh. It was really great, and you should have seen the fellas doing all the work. They had to hammer out plaster and everything to put the cables in. 3 hours later, it looked like a new place, and we had a camera that moved. It was amazing. Great job, Mike. Your team is amazing.
Great. Well
Yeah, they are. Hey, Mike, I sent you a WhatsApp message. Please check it. I think I sent it 2 or 3 days ago.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
Well,
So
we'll
I'm
get
And
on
you're
to-
looking good. Both of you are looking good.
Thank you.
right. So I'm going to wrap it all up. Like, I hope you've been there for the whole session, Mike. It's lovely to see you. Thanks for everybody who's been here. John had to go off early. I can't do this without all you fellas coming along and joining in, and I love it to bits. We've had a really global, been all over the world one way or another. The question I haven't answered, Baba, is your story. I think the person to ask is Sue from South Africa.
Sue from South Africa, because that
Yeah.
was the template I based my story on. And by the way, Vita was talking about just discovering a story. The story I shared today, I made up on the fly. It was inspired by the South African story, but it just hit me. Oh, I know what to do, and so I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Don't
No,
tell us you make
absolutely,
stories
brilliant.
up, Baba.
Yeah, absolutely. I will check with Sue, but so don't quite. But out of my memory, I believe that would be the person I would ask sat here in Shropshire tonight.
All
Okay.
right.
Right, so I'm going to call it good night, everybody. I hope you've had a good time. I hope you've had and I'll see you all. Keith, I'll see you tomorrow. Everybody else, good night, good night.
Good night.
Night
right,
all. Another
everyone stay
excellent night,
blessed.
even though I couldn't see anything. Night
Most of all,
all.
stay you.
And Baden, good
Right.
luck on your journey.
Cheers, mate. We'll talk. Bye.
Bye.
Bye
Take
bye,
care.
everyone. Masalama. Bye. Wally, thank you, as always, for flying with us.
Tutu Onana Baka Hanana, which is Swahili slang for until the next time. Either that or it said, who put the foot in the soup? I don't know. It's one of the two.
Laila Saeed.
Missing you guys. See you soon.
See ya.
Bye.